That's the word I said, and the glass on the coffee table hummed like it had been struck by a tuning fork, and my mother's mouth opened and closed without sound, because in her script I was supposed to say, "Of course, Mom," or "How can I help?" or at least, "Let me think about it." But I said the flat, clean, one-syllable word, and the room tilted, and she clutched the couch cushion as if furniture could give moral support. And my sister, princess of the family photo wall, blinked like a deer stepping into high beams and whispered, "You don't mean that." And I said it again without raising my voice. No, and everything that followed, lawyers, auctions, the for sale sign staked into the lawn like a white flag, happened because I finally chose a word that didn't include me carrying everyone else. It's odd how one word can feel like a switch in a breaker box, how you can hear the click in your chest and the quiet after when the buzzing stops. And you suddenly realize the buzzing had been there your entire life, a sound you thought was part of the world. When I left the apartment that day, I didn't sprint, I didn't gloat, I didn't deliver a clever final line. I just placed my jacket over my arm and stepped into late afternoon sun, and the city looked like it knew and was fine with it. I walked to the corner bodega for a seltzer, and the guy at the register said, "How's your day?" And I said, "Historic." And he laughed like it was a joke, which is a very American thing. Turn something heavy into something light so it's safe to carry. Historic is a big claim. Maybe I should back up and give you the full messy tour, because history rarely starts with the headline moment. It starts in the small print. The small print in our house looked like this. My sister had her portrait done every fall by a photographer who made every girl look like she'd just been scouted for a shampoo commercial, while my photo was a school ID taken under fluorescent lights that made me resemble a nocturnal animal. The small print sounded like this: "We only have enough for one extracurricular," followed by the exact dollar numbers for cheer camp, while my plea for a used guitar earned a shrug and, "You're built for independence." Independence tasted like off-brand cereal in a bowl chipped on the rim, and independence looked like me mowing the lawn for $10 while my sister got an allowance to focus on her potential. Modern people love the word potential when it lets them decide who deserves help and who should learn tough love. There was a flag by our front door, the stars and stripes hanging year-round, and Mom told visitors our home was God-fearing, honest, middle-class American, a place where we didn't ask for handouts, we worked. Funny how some people call it work when you do it and sacrifice when they do. We were a toxic family but with excellent branding. Church on Sundays, casseroles for neighbors, a car magnet that said "Proud Mom of a Varsity Cheerleader," and somewhere in there I became the family's designated ghost. If you've never been a ghost in your own house, let me tell you, you open the fridge and the food isn't for you, you walk into a room and conversations pause not because you're unwelcome, but because you're irrelevant. You learn to make a joke out of your appetite. I once carved my initial in the back of a kitchen drawer just to prove to future archaeologists that I had existed, and when Mom found it, she told me defacing property was a betrayal of household values. That's the word she used, betrayal, as if I'd cheated on a marriage contract with the silverware. The Last Supper happened the week I turned 17. It's dramatic to call it that, but if we're going to be honest about the story, then we might as well admit that drama kept me alive. Mom roasted a chicken that smelled like magazine illustrations of wholesomeness, and the table was set with the nice plates that only came out when her work friends were visiting or when my sister had a victory. I asked if we were celebrating something, and Mom said we were celebrating a shift in the household dynamic. That night she slid an envelope across the table toward me as if it contained a college acceptance or a winning lottery ticket. Inside was a pamphlet from a transitional youth program run by a church 3 towns over, housing for young adults pursuing independence. A phrase painted in cheerful font over a photo of a kid fixing a bike. "You said independence was your strength," she told me. "This is your time to shine." I laughed because sometimes laughter is what comes out when your heart hits the floor. She said I could stay one more night and then begin the next chapter, which was a generous way of saying leave. I left. You expect fireworks when you walk away from your childhood, but mostly there's the sound of your own shoes and the weight of your bag, which is always lighter than your memories. The program took me in for a month, which is what charity does best. 1 month, clearly labeled, renewable only if you can prove you don't need it. I worked at a movie theater where teenage couples learned to rehearse adult heartbreak, and where butter-stained napkins taught me entire philosophy courses on the value of mess. I got an apartment eventually, modest, one of those places where the stove leans left and you can hear your neighbor's phone vibrate through the wall, and the first night there I slept on the floor because the mattress delivery got delayed. And I cried, not from sorrow but from the luxury of having a room where silence answered to me. I built a life. It's not glamorous, but it belongs to me. I learned to cook exactly 3 impressive meals for friends and dates. I kept a plant alive long enough to regret naming it. I paid a credit card bill on time and nearly framed the receipt. I read library books about how people become the stories they tell, and I vowed to tell myself a story where I was more than the leftover sibling. Every now and then, curiosity would send me orbiting around my old neighborhood. The way you Google an ex, you're definitely over. I'd drive past the house with its perfect lawn and the flag and the new SUV parked in the driveway, and I'd feel an old itch to be noticed. The kind of itch you scratch so long it stops hurting and simply becomes part of your skin. Time, like any good American TV show, refuses to end when it should. The phone call came on a Tuesday. Mom's name pulsed on the screen like a forgotten alarm. Maybe you think I'd ignore it. Maybe I should have. But curiosity is a gateway drug, and family is a dealer who never runs out. Her voice sounded 3/4 human and 1/4 voicemail, the way people speak when they're measuring each word for how it will look in the transcript later. She said, "Honey, can we talk?" Which is a phrase that usually precedes one of 2 things, a marriage proposal or a bill. In our family it meant a bill. She arrived at my apartment wearing her concerned parent face, which had the same expression lines as her proud mom face, only indoors. She brought cookies. She always had a way of weaponizing sugar. We sat in my small kitchen, and she told me the fairy tale in reverse. Once upon a time, the princess started a side hustle selling essential oils that cured stress by giving you anxiety. Then she invested in crypto because a boy in a suit explained it was the future of decentralized empowerment. Then the boy vanished with the money. Then the credit card statements reproduced like rabbits. Then the house got mortgaged to plug one hole and then another. And now my sister was drowning and my mother was holding a bucket. I listened and nodded and occasionally said, "Wow," because empathy is my second language even when I don't want to speak it. She said we were a family and families stick together. I thought about all the times the glue had failed when it was my turn to be held. Here's where the conspiracy part sneaks in if you were waiting for it. Our suburb has a homeowners association, HOA, which if you've never encountered one is like a small government that cares less about roads and more about the length of your grass. Over the years, the HOA had developed a kind of mythology, which in our town meant potlucks where the president wore a sash and a creed that included a uniform aesthetic for property values and shared legacy. Sounds harmless until you read the minutes from their meetings and realize they weren't merely discussing fence styles. They were codifying what a good family looks like and how to shame the others into compliance. Mom had served as secretary for years. There's a photo of her on the website standing between 2 men with perfectly parted hair, and the caption reads, "Stewards of Community." She was fluent in a language where reputations are currency, and the worst sin is public failure. I don't think she realized until the day she knocked on my door that the HOA would sit in judgment of her too. Betrayal, when it finally visits the architects of it, does so with impeccable timing. I told her I'd think about what she'd said and call her within the week. I didn't mean it. I meant I wanted to watch how the words sat in my mouth when I tried them on. I'll help you versus I can't versus no. I went to work at the design office where I do layouts for small businesses, the yoga studio that needs a logo that says peace without looking like a cliché, the restaurant that wants menus that make their fries sound artisanal. I stared at fonts all day and thought about the font of my answer, the typography of revenge. People hear the word revenge and imagine cloaks and daggers, but sometimes revenge is simply refusing to participate in your own exploitation. Revenge is saying my wallet isn't a life raft and my body isn't a mule. By Friday, she returned with my sister in tow. My sister wore an expression I recognized from high school. Spiritual enlightenment achieved through contouring. She hugged herself as if collecting sympathy points. Mom launched into her sermon about family and forgiveness and healing. She said God had put us on a path toward reconciliation. I almost laughed, not at God, but at the idea that God moonlighted as a debt counselor. My sister offered her part in hushed tones, owning her mistakes in a way that announced she deserved applause for owning them. She said her business would rebound if only she had a fresh start and a small loan. By small, she meant the exact amount that would strip my savings to marrow. I pictured my rent notices, my plant, the couch I'd bought on Craigslist that smelled faintly of citrus and determination. I pictured the 17-year-old who left with a duffel and slept a month in a facility where lights out was at 10 and you had to request toilet paper from a person who logged it. I pictured the kitchen drawer I carved and my mother's lecture about betrayal of household values. I didn't stand up to deliver a monologue. I didn't raise my voice or use curse words. I didn't even rehearse. I just said no and sat still and watched it work. Power doesn't always need a drum roll. Sometimes it needs only a syllable. Mom tried a new round of arguments, expecting at least a negotiation. "We'll pay you back," she said, and I asked with what? "We're not asking for a handout," she said, and I told her the line between loans and handouts is invisible from where I sit. My sister muttered something about blood and loyalty, and I realized those words have been used to imprison more people than any jail. I said no again, and the sound changed the room. They left with faces stiff enough to shatter, and I felt a complicated wash of grief and relief, and something like joy, though joy is not quite right. It was more like integrity, humming in my bones. I slept deeply that night, then woke to a dozen messages recommending I reconsider because we only get one mother, as if scarcity is an argument. Over the next weeks I watched from a safe distance. The house went on the market, the HOA meetings looked tense in their photos, and there was a yard sale where the princess dresses hung on a rack like costumes from a canceled show. I went, not to gloat, but to buy the kitchen drawer. They weren't selling it. So I bought a mug that said blessed in farm chic letters, and I drank coffee from it every morning because I'm petty in ways I'm willing to admit. You might ask, did I feel guilty? Of course. Guilt is the American condiment. You can put it on anything, but guilt isn't a compass. It's an alarm, and sometimes alarms get stuck in a loop. I went to therapy, the real kind, not the kind my mother used to recommend, which was positive thinking and trying harder. My therapist was a woman with kind eyes and a bulldog named Arthur, who snored in the corner like a wise uncle. She told me there's a difference between revenge and boundaries, and somewhere in that difference is the part of me that can forgive without going back into the burning building. She told me people misuse the word betrayal when what they mean is disappointment. She said I had a right to my no, and I didn't have to earn it with a PowerPoint. She gave me homework, write letters I'd never send. So I wrote one to the girl I used to be, apologizing for all the nights I called her needy when she was hungry. I wrote one to my mother, not the sheriff of the HOA, but the girl she used to be before she learned that love is a scoreboard. I even wrote one to America, if you can believe it, asking if we could please come up with a better national anthem than Bootstrap Yourself. Conspiracy theorists will be disappointed that the alien essential oils didn't beam my sister onto a spaceship. If you need the sci-fi element, here it is. In our town, there was a rumor that the water tower hummed at night. And if you climbed its ladder and pressed your ear against the metal, you could hear the town's secrets. Who was sleeping where? Who was sliding money between bank accounts? Who was sitting alone in their kitchen praying for a break? We used to dare each other. I climbed it once the summer after I left, not because I believed in magic, but because hope wears costumes. The metal was warm, and I couldn't hear secrets, but I could hear a throb that sounded like a heart, and I decided the throb was mine. Maybe that's the whole conspiracy here. We carry our own water towers. Months passed. I saw Mom twice. The first time was at the grocery store where she examined a cantaloupe the way you examine a decision and then placed it back as if it had failed a character test. We made small talk about weather, and she mentioned she'd joined a new church that was less judgmental, which is something people say when they still want someone to tell them where to sit. The second time was outside the courthouse after a meeting with the mortgage company. She looked smaller and older and more human, which is how people look when they finally step off their platforms. She asked if we could have coffee sometime. I didn't say yes, I didn't say no. I said, "I'll think about it," and this time I meant it. Here is where the story could end because it would be tidier, but life refuses tidy endings. My sister, to my surprise, called me. Not for money. She asked if I would meet her at the park where we used to push each other on swings, or rather, where she used to push me too hard, then act innocent when I skinned my knee. We sat on the same bench, both older than we should be for that park, and she told me she had started a job at a community clinic not as a nurse or a hero, but as a receptionist who learned the names of regulars and how to look kids in the eye when they were scared of shots. She said she wanted to try being a real person. I told her it was easier than the alternative. She cried and apologized for some of it, not all. I didn't expect all. And I accepted what I could. And we decided that forgiveness might be less a ceremony and more a project that takes weekends. Maybe you want a grand finale where I reconcile with Mom in a tearful scene set to acoustic guitar. Maybe you want a final revenge where I buy her house and turn it into an artist collective named for the girl who carved a drawer. Instead, I'll give you this. I took a day off work and drove back to the transitional youth program, which now has a nicer sign and a better paint job. I asked if they needed anything. They said new sheets and an air conditioner for the room upstairs that gets too hot in summer. I bought them. I wrote a note for the staff to hand to anyone who arrived on a Thursday night because Thursdays are the hardest. The note didn't say it gets better, because sometimes it doesn't, not immediately. It said, "You are not trash. You are not a burden. The person who told you independence was your strength. Forgot to mention that community is your right." I signed it with my initial, the same letter I carved into a drawer. My phone still lights up with family texts sometimes, a photo of a baby cousin at a barbecue, a chain message about prayer, an invitation to a reunion where there will be potato salad and the subtle referendum on who turned out right. I go sometimes. I leave early sometimes. I laugh at jokes that don't require me to be the punchline. I bring a dessert that tastes expensive but costs very little because I learned something about appearances. At one reunion, Mom told a neighbor, "We're healing," and for once I didn't flinch, because healing is one of those words like freedom or family that can mean anything unless you define it for yourself. I define it like this: the ability to say no without a tremor and yes without an apology. Lest you think I'm claiming sainthood, let me confess, I still keep the mug that says "Blessed" out of spite. I drink from it on Tuesday afternoons because Tuesdays haunt me. I practice revenge fantasies sometimes when I'm bored, imagining a future where I run into the crypto boy at a gas station and pay for his gas with a wink, or where the HOA asks me to give a speech about resilience and I show up with a backpack of kitchen drawers. Then I let the fantasies drift because they're just cartoons my brain plays when real life gets slow. You want to know what happened to the house? Someone else lives there now, a family with a trampoline and a brown dog who does chase the kid who looks a little like me. The flag still hangs, but it's faded, and that feels honest. Sometimes when I drive past, I think about that envelope sliding across the table and the polite eviction included in a meal, and I feel the old heat crawl up my neck. Then I remember the word I own like a clean tool. No is a refusal, yes, but it is also a shape you make with your mouth to stop a story from repeating. No is a map that says turn here. There are people who will say, I should have given the money because it would have been the Christian thing, or the American thing, or the filial thing. There are people who will say, my no was revenge masquerading as boundaries. Maybe they're right. Maybe my motives will always hold traces of smoke. But here's what I know. When you grow up being told your purpose is to absorb other people's consequences, your first clear boundary will be mistaken for betrayal. The toxic family will accuse you of disloyalty because loyalty to them has always meant self-erasure. But you did not come into this world to be a subtraction. So yes, it began with a word, and that word turned their world upside down and righted mine. The city still looks like it knows and is fine with it. The bodega guy asks how my day is, and I say, with less irony now, quiet in the best way. Arthur the bulldog still snores through my sessions, and my therapist claims he's doing deep work in his dreams. The transitional home keeps their upstairs cool, and sometimes I drive by at night, and the building hums the way our water tower used to, and I think maybe the secret it's telling is simple. You belong where you are loved, and love is not a ledger. One more thing, because I promised myself I'd tell the messy, unglamorous truth. Last week, Mom texted me a photo of a pie she baked. Apple, the classic. She said she was learning new recipes. She offered to bring me a slice if I wanted. For 10 minutes I stared at the screen and heard a ghost spoon clink against a bowl in a kitchen that had always been a stage set with my chair slightly pushed back. I typed, "No," then paused, then backspaced and wrote, "Not today. Thanks," and hit send. The difference between revenge and boundaries sometimes looks like 2 more words, sometimes like a calendar. She typed back a heart, which I'm choosing to translate into humanity, not obligation. Maybe one day I'll say yes and accept the pie and eat it without wondering which part of me is supposed to pay for each bite. Maybe not. Healing doesn't demand plot twists. It asks for practice. If you're waiting for the scene where everything is forgiven and bathed in golden light, that's not the movie we're in. Our lighting is honest noon and quiet dusk, and the gray of a Tuesday where you do the laundry and buy the sheets and say the small words that line your day with truth. If this sounds ordinary, good. Ordinary is the opposite of the circus I grew up inside. Ordinary is the miracle. Ordinary is me at my window in the evening, watching the city be itself, humming a tune that belongs solely to my throat, drinking from my ridiculous mug, which is finally true. Not because the universe approves of me, but because I approve of me. When people ask what changed everything, I tell them it was a word. They assume the word is love, and I don't argue. Love has done heavier lifting than any of us. But the word that saved me now, and will save me again, is the one that made their world spin and mine steady. No. And if you worry that no is a door closing, trust me. I have learned that the right door closing can open a street, a map, a country, a life.